my God, for I said, hear me, lest otherwise they should rejoice over me. When my foot slips, they magnify themselves against me. For I am ready to halt, and my sorrow is continually before me. For I will declare mine iniquity, I will be sorry for my sin. But mine enemies are lively, and they are strong, and they that hate me wrongfully are multiplied. They also that render evil for good. Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Oh, the title card was actually wrong. And I will correct it when I post the video to YouTube, or when I finish the YouTube thing. It kind of automatically goes up there. We're beginning in verse 7. And I think I have to fix yesterday's too, because I think I said we went through verse 7. I don't know how I got that all messed up in my head. Okay, so he is a merchant. The balances of deceit are in his hand. He loveth to oppress. Speaking of Ephraim, I believe, right? We're talking about Ephraim. It's not talking about the Lord. It's you know, that was the last person we were speaking of, right? Well, it was speaking of Jacob and Ephraim, but in the previous, right? First Ephraim, then Jacob. But I think this is Ephraim because the next verse is talking about Ephraim. He is a merchant. Let's read the two verses together. He is a merchant. The balances of deceit are in his hand. He loveth to oppress. And Ephraim said, yet I am become rich. I have found me out substance in all my labors. They shall find none iniquity in me that were sin. And, oppress sometimes has the idea of defraud. We think of, oppression, defraud. There's a little different. We could look up the Hebrew word, because sometimes these words literally mean like things like to press and, like to push down, to keep down, to put pressure upon and all that. And others have a connotation of deceit. So let's just, it mentions deceit. So, it's all those things. A lot of these things, where's my, oh, here we go. The extra stuff, okay. And, why am I not in the wrong thing? Oh, there we go. Here we are. So let's see what it says. Verse 7, Paul. Love to oppress. A shock. It says to oppress. The quick definition there is to oppress, wrong, or extort. And here it says the same thing. But what does a root origin mean? It comes from a primitive root. And some of the translations, crushed. Related to words. Accuse, slander, etc. Okay. It's interesting. Like here we have Deuteronomy 24:14. I like this too. They show here on the right uses of the word. Oh, this is not what I was hoping for. This is like a breakdown from Hebrew, which is a little more than I want. Because I was sort of interested in just seeing, like it says, thou shalt not oppress hired servants. And this is a good example of how you can. A lot of times the definitions of words may not totally give you a key in on what it means, right? And so one of the other benefits from a concordance or a website that functions like a concordance, that'll have the definition of the words, like Bible Hub, or there are other ones too. They don't pay me, that's for sure. But I would gladly take their money. I guess. I don't know. Would I? Not really. Not if it came with strings attached, of course. But I mean, whatever. They provide a great service, so I don't know. What would the strings be? Sometimes you can go and get the context, and it'll help you understand. Like, it might say how the oppression might happen. Like, for example, here it says, "Thou shalt not oppress a hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren or of thy stranger that are in thy land within thy gates. At his day thou shalt give him his hire. Neither shall the sun go down upon it, for he is poor, and setteth his heart upon it, lest he cry against thee unto the Lord, and it be sin unto thee." See, the law of the Old Testament, people always like point out all these things like, oh, it's, it provided rules for how you could sell your family members into slavery. Yeah, because it was like people would just do that in desperation, and so there was rules. There's it's only for for a term and all that. It's not like hereditary slavery and the stuff we had in the antebellum South, which was completely horrific and not at all the way it was according to the biblical law. And a lot of the biblical law, as Jesus taught, is to regulate human behavior. It's not like God says, "Thou shalt sell thy daughter because I want you to," or like any more than it says, "Thou shalt get a divorce." Because the Old Testament had a law for divorce. And Jesus says, well, God doesn't want you to get divorced. That's not how he wanted it to be from the beginning. It was not so. And I'll tell you what, God doesn't want you to sell your family. It was not so from the beginning. It's not how God meant for things. Meant is the wrong word exactly, but that is not his desire. But I believe everything God brings about in this world, he intends. It's a little different. Intent is different in terms of like God has a purpose for all the things that are in the world. There's a purpose behind everything that goes on. But that does not mean he endorses the things that go on in terms of moral rectitude. He's not saying that the thing that like all the stuff that happened to Joseph. He was enslaved. He was brought down to Egypt. And then when he started to his fortunes began to rise in the house of Potiphar, one of the noblemen of Egypt. His fortunes began to rise and turn, and then his wife took a fancy to him, Potiphar's wife, and tried to seduce him. And that was, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my stream numbers going to 0. Great. On a clear day, I'm going to change my internet provider, to tell you the truth, because this is absolutely unacceptable. So Joseph's fortunes begin to turn, and then what happens? Let's see if there's anything interfering with it. No. And then he immediately gets thrown in jail because she accuses him of trying to rape her. When it was pretty much the opposite. She was trying to seduce him. And, so these are, but God intends these things. He says, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. And so there are laws that are in place because men are evil. And we need laws to govern our behavior. Or at least we have needed laws. It would be better if we needed no laws, but the law of Christ, which is in the Spirit, and which is we're trying to follow by being Christians. But so it has laws governing slavery, adultery, and also things like this, which you never hear unbelievers bring up. It's like, yeah, according to the Bible, when poor people work, they should get paid that day and not be made to wait. He said, you shouldn't let the sun go down on their labor because they need that money to eat. Now, we don't necessarily have that kind of crippling poverty in America. You know what I mean? But, like sometimes, like when you're starting a job, I remember starting a job and having to wait
for 2 paychecks. I don't know why that was. Yeah, I mean, you didn't get paid the first week. Like, they'd pay weekly, but they'd skip the first week. You don't get paid. You get paid the second week. And it was always like that. And, I don't know. It seemed like every job I had when I started, they didn't pay you for the first week. They paid you eventually. What I mean is, like, they delayed. I mean, 2 weeks delay. No, I didn't need the money. I was a, teenager in a home that was well provided for, so I didn't, need it. But still, it's kind of, it puts a kind of you need to have money to just start earning money. You gotta have money to drive your car to work every day, and so, you have to make it through the first week at least. And get to that paycheck. Imagine how hard it is for people who are like homeless and stuff to start a job. No address, blah, no this, no that. Nobody wants to hire them, and plus, you don't get paid until you work at least a week. So the law here has a provision that, and he calls this oppression. You know what I mean? Fathers shall not be put to death for their children, neither shall children be put to death for their fathers. The man shall be put to death for his own sins. And you can't kill people for things done by their offspring. But sometimes people would like to, I mean, it was things people did. Used to have to make a law about that. You shall not. Because people think, it's justice. People have weird ideas of what's just in their own eyes. The Lamech, the descendant of Cain. Gosh, I'm just looking at this big red square. It's ridiculous. It's like I'm having such a slow internet. Well, hopefully the stream isn't terrible, but man, it looks like it's got to be awful. It's kicking up there. So, Lamech, one of the sons of Cain, killed a man who wounded him. A man wounded me, and I slew him. And if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, then Lamech should be avenged 70 times sevenfold. Because, Abel didn't do nothing, and Cain killed him. Well, this guy hurt me, and I killed him. And he had this sort of sense of like, there's a weird, like that strange, the sort of, the mark on Cain and his protection always kind of baffled me. And I haven't given it a lot of thought, really, because I've never considered it that important. But it seems wrong. It's like, why should he be protected? Why didn't God just strike him down right there? You know what I mean? Like, what my punishment is more than I can bear. I don't know. I don't want to go into that because that's not the subject here, but it's something to think about. I always thought weird. Because then Lamech looks at that and he starts taking that as a precedent. Like, well, Cain should be avenged sevenfold. Me 70 times sevenfold. People tend to think of their, it is a human tendency to minimize your own sins and think more of things that hurt you than of things that hurt other people. People are often much harsher judges of others than they are of themselves. Though some people are more harsh, when it comes to, I don't know, I want to say, sometimes we're very harsh judges of ourselves in certain respects. I do think, like, you go to church, you look around you, everyone's dressed up nice. Nobody's talking about necessarily, nobody's like saying like, well, here are all the things I did wrong this week. Here are all the ways in which I failed to live up to the glory of God. Here are the ways I think I could do better. Failing to live up to the glory of God doesn't necessarily mean you have to be involved in some sin or iniquity. It might just be, you could have done better. I didn't give my all. to everything. This week it seemed like more than I can bear, but maybe you could have. You could have just pushed through a little harder and done a little better. And we all should live up to the best of our potential. We should strive to, anyways, to live up to that, to the best we can do. I mean, you can't be asked to do more than you can do. I mean, we have limits to all of our abilities, right? But if we are, if we're not using our fullest abilities, the full extent of our abilities, then what's that then? I mean, we ought to use the full extent of what we're capable of. I mean, we ought to use all our powers to do whatever. Whatever you do, do it with your might, it says. Go at things with that zeal, with that power, with that willingness to commit yourself fully to it. Again, and that's pushing towards perfection of just what your own self, what you are. The full, if I'm a 2-talent guy, I want to make full use of my 2 talents, to reference the parable where the servants were each given a number of talents. And the one who had 2 came back with 2 more. And the one who had 5 came back with 5 more. And if there had been one with 4, the right thing he would have done was come back with 4 more. The idea is that he lived up to the potential that was given him. And 100% return on investment is good. And good is actually an understatement. It's great. That's all the master could hope for. He was very pleased. But the one who came back and said, "You gave me 1, I give you 1. Here's your thing back." Very displeased. I don't want to just say, God, you gave me grace and that was sufficient for me. And having that grace, I decided, well, that was all my grace is sufficient for you. It says that. God's grace is sufficient for me, but what is sufficient for God? What is my response to this? Is my heart filled with nothing but who cares? So, when we measure things, this goes back to what Jesus says about with what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again. Now, I was saying in church, you don't go in there necessarily. You may look around you and judge yourself harshly. Say, I'm such a sinner. These people all seem so upright. That's how I use that example because that's how I felt when I go to church. I think like everyone here is probably more righteous than me. And maybe I'm weird. I don't know. But I mean, I think the people probably have that sense, I guess. Here's the thing. If you're going to church and you're looking at everybody and saying, oh, what a bunch of sinners compared to yourself, you may want to look at yourself a little more carefully, okay? If you do have the opposite view, I'm sorry. I mean, I guess I've heard it said that people tend to be harsh judges of themselves. Maybe that's true. And I would say in certain contexts. I would say in the idea that you, like, when it comes to small things like little social miscues, I think like in a social situation, if I say something embarrassing, I'm much more embarrassed than I feel, let's call it, not enraged, but then I feel like sort of put off when someone else says something embarrassing. When someone else says something embarrassing, I tend to think it's funny and I feel badly for them. I don't feel like a harsh judge. But here's the thing, when people do actual bad things, though, when they do actual iniquity or sin, do we really think this is still true? When other people commit adultery, are we more, I've never committed adultery, not, I mean, and so do we look at them and say, well, there you go. That's why Jesus said things like, whosoever is angry with his brother is in danger of the judgment. And it's not just about murder. Because like I said, when other people murder or commit adultery or steal or lie, Are we just as more harshly judgmental of ourselves when we do those things? I don't know. People do tend to. I think that Jesus wouldn't warn us if there was not at least the potential that we would be harsher judges of other people. People tend to excuse themselves and condemn others. Well, my behavior is understandable because I know all the reasons I did what I did. My behavior is, perfectly justifiable because I had all these causes, like Lamech. And whereas we look at other people and we don't know all that, so we just tend to say, well, what a terrible person, they did this thing. Now, the prophet obviously probably has in mind something a lot more specific in terms of injustice. He is a merchant. That's not meant to be flattery. One of the things that God said, and I shouldn't just not give any thoughts on this. I should instruct on this. One of the things in the Proverbs that says God finds abominable, right up there with the big abominations, is a deceitful balance, deceitful weights and measures. And basically it's like someone puts their, like you go to the gas station, look at the gas pump. There's a little sticker on there that says it's been inspected by the state. That's to make sure that when you pump the gas into your car, like you may go, because otherwise you might go there and it says, oh, look at this gas station, the gas is cheaper. It's 10 cents cheaper here, than across the street. You go pumping, but you don't realize you're getting not quite a gallon, but the little number. I was going to say the little number ticks by. It doesn't anymore. It used to go tick, 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 tick. I remember those old dial. That's how old I am. I remember pumping gas with the mechanical pump where the little numbers would go around in a circle. I haven't seen one of those in years. And so, anyways, you see the little digital numbers flash by, right? And it does make a little ticking sound. That's the pump, though. And the numbers go by, and you think you're getting so much gas, but you're not. You're not getting so much gas. You're getting just a little less every gallon. Not enough for you to notice as you fill her up. You might notice. You're like, I thought I just put 15 and a half gallons in my tank. Usually it only takes 15. Strange, but you're not likely to think about it. Or maybe you are. But you're not if you see that inspection sticker. Because you say, like, well, someone's been in to check these things. Right? It's not like, but, adjust weights and measures. The idea of the butcher putting his thumb on the scale. And that's something we have to this day as a metaphor for injustice and for ripping people off. Right? They put their thumb on the scale, meaning that they are unjustly rigging the system against you. God hates that in all its forms. God hates that kind of oppression, that kind of deceit or defrauding, however you want to look at it. That kind of, like I said, it can be, the word oppress can have a lot of different meanings depending on the context. My original sense of going there for the context, I got a little distracted, but it was to demonstrate that, and I'm just going to say this point just in passing as an important point. So sometimes the dictionary definition is not particularly helpful. The best way to discern the meaning of a word is to look at all the occurrences of that word in the Bible, and your concordance is good for that. You look at all the occurrences, and you look at the way it's used, and through the context, you can determine the sense of that word. It may have several senses, just like words in English have several senses, meaning a sense in which it can be taken. And so then, if it has a couple senses, then in the context you're currently studying, you will need to discern which sense it may have, or maybe you should look at both senses and from that derive different possible meanings. Because you can take a word in both senses, and both meanings may have valid application, which is important to remember, because it's like I said, you can have the wrong interpretation and have the right idea, meaning it's a right idea, maybe not what that scripture is talking about. I know I do this from time to time. I say things that are right. I do. The Spirit of God is in me, and I've studied the Bible for a long time, and so I know the right things, as far, especially morally speaking, and so on and so forth. But may not, in that context, always get it right. So sometimes people ask me, "Do you ever make mistakes?" I think, yes, all the time. Of course, I make mistakes. That's not what I'm worried. It was not making mistakes. I don't want to have a systematic way of studying, though, that's an error, that just generates mistakes, or just hold on to things, or be sloppy, and so on and so forth, that in such a way that I'm not just making a mistake. Like, I'm conscious that I might be making mistakes very often. As I'm going through it, I have this uncertainty of understanding. And that's good, because God is in heaven and I am on earth, and I should be mindful of that fact. Actually, the scripture there says that from that passage, therefore let thy words be few. But it was actually being, say, Paul, well, you talk a lot, I do. Well, it was talking about going into the house of God and uttering things, especially in terms of promises to God. Like, oh, I promise, blah, 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 blah. You can't make things happen the way God can make things happen. A lot of times our temptation, like, we'll say, oh, Lord, if you just help me out this time, I'll do this, that, the other. And then you can't fulfill your promise, and that's not good. You shouldn't promise things to God and then not fulfill it. You shouldn't swear at all, as Jesus said. You can't make one hair on your head black or white. Sure, you can dye them. See, that's how my mind works. You can dye them, you can change the color, but that doesn't change their fundamental nature. You can't change the fundamental nature of things by messing around with them externally, whether by using chemicals on them. Look, I made a gray hair black. No, you dyed a gray hair black. It's like you can't make a man not a man. Make him something else. What could that be? Ephraim said, yeah, and become rich. Well, he loveth to oppress. There's a certain delight that people take, isn't there, in ripping people off. That is may seem odd. I have a strange itch on my shin. Okay. Some people, once you give yourself over to being wicked, people, they start defrauding people, stealing people. They get this wicked pleasure and start thinking they're so much smarter and cleverer. Because what they're doing is they're taking advantage of the general trust and goodwill of people to other people. One, to have the tendency to believe them. When they walk around as such liars in the midst of so much honesty, they feel like, I'm just so clever and I'm the wolf of the world. And as they lie and deceive people who are otherwise credulous and willing to believe. People are willing to believe. And these will take advantage of that. And Ephraim said, so he loved to oppress. Okay. And Ephraim said, yet I am become rich. I found me out of substance. Yeah, because I'm successful at this. Holding back wages. It's like as long as I still have the money, I have the possibility to make it work for me. That was the Old Testament. That was the Deuteronomy example. He's not really. I don't think holding back wages is really the thought here. It's another kind of fiscal oppression, which means ripping people off, not giving people what they expect. I'm going to expand on that. Sure. I think in some ways we get ripped off religiously. They put their thumbs on the scale. Yeah, they do. Our religious leaders are putting their thumbs on the scale. That's how they do it. I was praying the other day, and the Lord said to me, Jimmy, you got to do this and blah, 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 blah. Or I was praying and the Lord said, Oral Roberts did this famous thing where he says, if you don't get $1 million, I'm calling you home. I mean, what a scumbag. I mean, literally. I'm sorry. I apologize. I've been admonished not to use so much profane speech, because it does not become a man of God. But I should come up with a better word. Well, it is iniquity. What if he really? No, that's not what happened. They lie. I'm really, here's the scale. And what's on the other end of the scale? Your willingness to trust them. Your goodwill. Your admiration. All of a sudden they'll say, God said to me, and push the scale down. They give themselves greater weight. It's just there's a lot of put on. I see pastors preaching. It says like, oh yeah, I'll see. I don't see pastors preaching. I avoid it as much as possible. I can't stomach it, to tell you the truth, for the most part. I mean, some guys are all right. I don't know why. There's certain guys I've thought of, like, I've watched them. I'm like, okay, he's all right. I guess he seems okay. Certainly, I there are some guys whose demeanor I am more appreciative of. I do dislike that's the whole, like, I'm the big weighty man of God, and I don't know. There's a certain attitude, and I don't know. I was listening, to good old brother Swaggart on the radio. This is true. I wouldn't watch. I don't get TV, so thank goodness I don't have to be tempted to watch preachers on TV anymore. I mean, I haven't for 17 years had. We have a TV, by the way. I have computer monitors. I have a television set. We don't receive any channels out here, though. I'm in an area where there's no TV out here. I think if you have a really big antenna, this house had an antenna. I took it down when I did my roof. I think if I had hooked up a TV to that, I probably would have gotten a station out of Rockford or something. But I don't. So I don't get any religious program. But I do get lots of radio stations. They're everywhere. At night I look around and I can see the towers. And of course we get the several Christian radio stations, like most people, right? This is America still. And Jimmy Swaggart was talking about his new album. And I'm like, I just couldn't help thinking, I'm like, man, let another man's lips praise you, dude. It's just talking about how anointed his music is and blah, 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 and how, great pleasure to share this anointed music. It's the highest form of art. And I think it's the highest form of art, but he says the Music that is anointed is the biggest kind of blessing in it. And he's selling it. It's not like he's saying, go to YouTube and download it for free. It's a huge blessing. He's putting on the scale. This is worth a lot more than I bet it, I don't know. I'm like, I wonder if his albums sell at retail price or if it's like jacked up because it's a donation. Though on the same token, I bet you if you called them and said like you were really poor, and don't lie to them if you aren't, but if you did, if you were poor and say I really want to hear Brother Swaggart sing and I can't afford it, but he talked about it so much it touched my heart. I guarantee you they'd send it. Okay, just to come a little bit. I almost I would love to have someone tell me like I tried. They don't. No, they usually do. I would be very surprised because it's probably not usual. There are people calling up all the time to get Swaggart albums for free. Though I'd be surprised if they don't. But yeah, I don't know if I should guarantee it. But that was just, I mean that in a hyperbolic sense, I guarantee. It's like I'm almost certain. People do things, they defraud, they put their fingers on the scale, right? They make you believe you're getting more than what you're really getting. I think that's very true in religion. It's very true in a lot of things. Like, here's another example. Get rich quick schemes. Like, I'm not going to use this example because I don't like to talk bad about people I like. Okay. Well, it's not, and plus, I don't know if it was actually, I was going to use, well, I'll use the example. Sure, why not? But, like, it's more of, this is, well, like, I'll use this example. I'm going to keep the names out of it. But, like, there's a lot of different ways they try to get people, like, hey, you want to become rich? I've got a course on how to become an internet millionaire. For example, I've seen on YouTube a lot of these people, they'll tell you you can make a lot of money on selling on Amazon, becoming an Amazon seller. And I have no doubt that's true. But a little bit's weird, like I'm 19 and I'm a millionaire and I've made all this money on Amazon. Maybe they are, but they are probably a freak of nature level of hustler. Because there's no, I mean, as far as like, and I mean not in the sense of like a someone who's a huckster type hustler, but I mean someone who just moves and is really got a lot of hustle. Chances are, if you're 40 and you haven't found yourself a way to hustle up a lot of money, like this course is not going to help you. So, here's a way I can make money. There are literally thousands of ways to make money. Some people are good at it, others are not. And I've always been in the latter category, unfortunately. But I do have the intelligence to recognize. Like when I was, for example, when I was 19, 20? Somewhere around that age, a friend of mine got involved with this, I forgot the name of it. It was this, I don't remember now, it was Equinox. They're probably not in business anymore. Equinox, water filter business, right? And you go in there, they have their little conference at this hotel, so it seems like a big deal. You go in and they give you this sales pitch, right? They say, you can make a ton of money doing this, You buy these filters and you sell them and they're easy to sell and all these products, these health products. And they're extremely high priced and it's like they're not easy to sell. If you sell a filter and your friends send a filter and friends sells a filter, it's a pyramid scheme essentially, right? But there are all these make money easy things out there, right? And the way they make money often is by getting people to get their system or and there are always going to be people who are honestly successful at it because there's a degree to which someone with a bit of a hustle to them can make money hustling. A product, a service, whatever. It's not going to work for you, though, if you don't have those skills. Because to make money, it takes a skill. You got to either have some sort of technical skill, or you have, like if you're making money on Amazon, you got to be good at managing, finding products people want to buy, putting them up there, and you got to hustle that. I mean, you got to be really on the ball, looking for the right thing, getting things up there, and just on that front alone, I do product advertisements and stuff for Amazon products, and it's like, I did a dog collar video for someone, and just to advertise their product, and you just see, I looked up the same. There's like hundreds of the same thing. It's so ridiculously competitive for these little product niches. Have you ever noticed that? How many different versions of just some simple thing there is? It's like, you think you're going to bust into that and just make it big? And you look at some of them, I'm like, yeah, feedback 3, 4, 5. They're not selling tons of them, all of them. It's not so easy. And what it is people make it seem easy to do something a certain way. And then for the secrets of real estate, of marketing, or whatever it is they want to suck you into, of investing, it'll make money easy investing. They put their thumb on the scale to make you think you're getting more, like a surefire way to make money. There are no ways to do this that don't involve. You have to have some sort of skill in some field or another, some sort of talent in some way or another. You cannot just make money without some sort of learned skill. And those things are not. There are some talents are inborn, but if you aren't born with the talent for something like sales, it can be learned, but it's something that must be. If you don't have the natural talent, you must learn it. And a lot of times they don't tell you the background things you really need to succeed at a lot of these things. I just want to give those examples because something other than just religion. And then they'll say, yet I'm become rich. People defraud other people. They rip them off. They provide these schemes to get rich or to become spiritually blessed or to become, to become more appealing to the opposite sex. Try to, there are all kinds of ways things they want you to, this will totally lift you up, man, and this is what it costs. You get so much for so little. And they profit from it. And they look at all their labors and they say, you can't find, in all my labors they shall find none iniquity in me that were sin. What a weird thing to say. I think that's a funny verse, isn't it? None of my iniquities are sin. I think it's, what we have here is a case of lack of self-awareness. You know what I mean? That's how it feels to me anyways. Like, they don't even see, they don't see what they, there we go, that's better. They don't see themselves as they are. They say to themselves, none of these things I do are sins. What are these things? These things I do are iniquity. Oh, but it's no sin. There's nothing wrong with that. They excuse themselves for all the ways they defraud people. They find justifications. I had a friend who got involved in this one of these schemes, and I tried to warn him. I'm like, I think this is really bad idea, dude. And he just didn't want to listen and went into it, and he got someone else involved who was very badly affected by it. And that changed it for him. He saw that someone was hurt by this thing. And because he human feeling, I guess. Or it wasn't past feeling. Sometimes people become past feeling. And I think in our world today, we see so much hypocrisy from people. I think I mentioned how there was this, the comedian who was lamenting. It's like everyone wants to throw the first stone. Yeah, everyone wants to throw the first stone these days. And it's getting worse. Because they're actually sometime, the universities teaching people or have taught people, I don't know if they still are so hot about it because it's backfiring on themselves, that words are violence and harm is happening to you when you hear something uncomfortable. And therefore, it's legitimate to respond with physical violence when someone is verbally says something you find hateful or disturbing or upsetting, hurts your feelings. And people are quick to jump on each other because of the way social media works, People dogpile. It's like I said, I noticed people love to vent their outrage about different people, like the things they do, the sins they commit. Whatever sins they are, there's a lot of biblical sins people no longer consider them sins, and we consider, not we, but I mean the world considers things like, same-sex marriages to being virtue. We can make this virtuous. Now they can marry and they don't have to be, since when, since when did not being married stigmatize anything anymore? Like when a man and woman are not married and living together, is there still a stigma for that? I think it's stigmatic. I think it's wrong. It's wrong. But society doesn't see it that way. So I don't know how it became virtuous. And it's kind of a joke because it's like marriage is about the interaction between two humans that brings about babies, essentially. It's not about love. Though it's beautiful when it has love in it, And I confess, I didn't marry to have children. I married because of love. But, and so I understand people's desire to marry people they love. I do. That doesn't make it right anyways, It's a result of the pollutions of this world. They shall find none iniquity in me that were sin, or in me that were sin. I know how to emphasize that. They look at their own deeds and they say, it's all justifiable. While they're completely content in destroying the lives and careers of others. I recently heard a news story that there was a group of people on one side of the political aisle that's fed up with the other side of the political aisle, always, or I don't know if they're fed up, but I think what they did is they realized, you know what? The people over there are a bunch of self-righteous hypocrites. And they're so willing to eat and devour their own. What we'll do is we'll collect information about things people have said, like little things they said on Twitter or whatever, those, Facebook, wherever they're posting. They find comments they made that were either racially insensitive or whatever, things they said. Everyone says things, makes comments that, I don't know. It's funny because on a lot of these platforms, you're doing it in your own name. I did that. I started doing that years ago, and I started being cognizant of I'm speaking in my own name, and I have a reputation I care about. I don't consider myself completely anonymous or completely private. I'm not. I haven't been for years. I'm not entirely a private individual. In some ways, I belong because of publishing my Bible studies, my music. I had contact with the public and not just with my own private family people and friends. So I've never considered myself completely private. So I always, when I say stuff, I realize I'm saying that. It's not just on the screen like, oh, look at, isn't that, a long time ago I discovered it was not always best to say the most clever thing I could think of. Through my interactions with students of Arnold Murray, because I was putting these on my website. If I was a jerk to these people, if I was unkind in my words, everyone's going to see it. And in some ways, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's ever read through all the things I wrote. There's a lot there. I wasn't always so kind. I wasn't as kind as I should be. Especially in the earlier ones. And I'm not going to take them down because I'm like, lesson learned. And if people think less of me because I said those things, well, then you know what? I'm not going to fight again. I'm like, yeah, I do too. But these days they don't want to forgive even, you're not even allowed to be contrite. If you've ever uttered anything, they'll destroy you. And so if that's the case, you can see why this political group would say like, well, let's go find all these people on the other side of the political spectrum. And we're going to take all the things they've said that could get them in trouble with their friends who've forgotten, because they're unchristian, ungodly, unbelieving. And you know what? When you forget about Christ, maybe you forget that he was the one who said, let him that is without sin cast the first stone. You throw they throw Christianity out, and they think we can still be moral people. We can really be moral. We can be even moral than Christians. We'll be much more holy than you. We are. And that's with a holier than thou attitude. We are living in the midst of a holier than thou culture. A culture where they gather around with their stones, metaphorical stones. Anyone caught out in sin in their eyes, and whatever they define sin to be. But they think of themselves and they think like, well, there's none of my iniquities are sin. Not realizing that iniquity and sin are synonymous. Your iniquities are sin, and they will find you out. Didn't get very far there. Verse 8. Oh, we still got time. Not much. And I that am the Lord thy God from the land of Egypt will yet make thee to dwell in tabernacles, as in the days of the solemn feast. I have also spoken by the prophets, and I have multiplied visions and used similitudes by the ministry of the prophets. That's a verse that gets quoted from time to time. Is there iniquity in Gilead? Surely they are vanity. They are sacrifice of bullocks. They sacrifice bullocks in Gilgal. Yea, their altars are as heaps in the furrows of the field. It goes back to talking about Jacob again, just like he did in the previous part of this chapter about Jacob fleeing to Syria and serving for a wife. So let's look at these three verses and see. I that am the Lord thy God out of the land of Egypt, or from the land of Egypt. From that time I've been your God, the God of your people. I will yet make you to dwell in tabernacles. Sorry. Oh wait, did I skip a verse? No. So I know what this means. Tabernacles are tents, and it refers to them dwelling in movable places in tents, like in the days of the solemn feast. Does that mean like I either brought you out of Egypt, will yet again bring you up out of the land of captivity? Because I don't think this means, because you go into captivity naked. You don't have provisions. You don't have tents. But on your journey back, maybe you've been able to earn some belongings and return. You know? Maybe you've been able to buy yourself freedom. There are all kinds of ways to buy freedom. You know, in those ancient times, it wasn't race slavery either. So it wasn't like you just stuck out like a sore thumb. Like, there's a slave, I can tell by the color of his skin. It's always important to remember that, like, never in the Bible is a whole race of men consigned to slavery. A lifelong hereditary slavery, that's just unheard of. That would be an abomination. It was an abomination. Did they use the Bible to justify it? Sure. You can use the Bible to justify all kinds of things. People still do it to this day. But it's a misuse of the Scripture to justify sin. There's no iniquity in me that was sin. Look, here, I've got the Scriptures to prove it. And as in the days of the solemn feast, you know, like when they took I think he probably means the Passover or the Feast of Tabernacles, remembering their dwelling in tents. I don't know which feast, but like, you know, I mean, I think we're saying we're going to return. This is go back to the good old days when we dwelt in tents and we followed the Lord and we kept the solemn feast, right? When we honored God. It's a call back and return to the sort of more innocent times. That's what I think this verse means. He's referring back to Egypt, to when they dwelt in tents, and to when they kept the feast of the Lord. They honored God. I am that am the Lord thy God, right? I will yet make you to dwell in tabernacles. I have also spoken by the prophets. I sent prophets to call you back to me, and to call you back to the way things ought to be. I've spoken by the prophets. I've multiplied visions and used similitudes. You know, similitudes is like parables and metaphors and similes. Similitudes is similar to similes, but things that are like, you know, analogies by the ministry of the prophets. I mean, look at Hosea. He uses a major metaphor or analogy. It's an analogy. See me and my harlot wife? That's God and Israel. The Lord told me to take a prostitute to take a wife of whoredoms. And because I don't think it necessarily means she was a whore. I think I explained that. But she was a wife, you know, but I mean, not, remember, I said, sex outside of marriage, or sex before marriage, was playing the harlot. She hath played the harlot. My daughter hath played the harlot. She hath gone and lain with a man. You know, it was something that's to be, it was what weddings were for. You know, it was to be an official, recognized socially thing. Not just going out and doing it. They, well, what about the men? Okay, yes, fornicators, all of them. But that's not the words they used. They called it playing the harlot. For the ladies. It's just what it was. And he did not, though she may have been that kind of harlot, she was not, because the northern tribes were immoral and they didn't follow the law of God, and they also worshipped idols, which is another form of spiritual idolatry. But she, then when they got married, she committed adultery on him. And the reason the Israel, you know, God hints that they started off in Egypt worshiping idols when they were slaves. They were not entirely, you know, the God of Jacob was kind of like the God of Jacob, but the gods of the Egyptians were very real too to them. And they kept many of them. And why did they so readily worship the golden calf? It's because that they had worshipped similar things in Egypt. Okay, I have multiplied visions, used similitudes, analogies like Hosea used by the ministry of the prophets. I mean, God said, I sent messengers. I've sent messages. God always sends his messengers to bring his message and to call people back to him, to call his people to him. Is there iniquity in Gilead? Is there something wrong? Surely they are vanity. They sacrifice bullocks in Gilgal. Remember I said Gilgal was one of the principal places mentioned in Hosea. There was a problem. And I explained early in the book, it was like Samuel was one of the places he made on his circuit, and it was an important place. I think it was also where Israel demanded a king. Or no, wait. Or where Saul actually finally, Gilgal was where he offered the sacrifice he wasn't supposed to, and his disobedience disqualified him from being king anymore. But it was a place of sacrifice that they used, and it was not the place God had ordained. So, yeah, they make sacrifices. I think vanity might be out of place here. I'm not going to look it up. As far as it may be out of place translation of the word there. That's shav. The same word we had earlier in the chapter. I'm looking at Bible Hub. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it was the last. Oh, there we go. I believe. Oh wait, it was showed. Shoah. I said shav before. Shoah was the word for the Holocaust. The Shoah. And that's modern Hebrew, anyways. So it's showed 7701 for desolation in verse 1. And here vanity is shav, which is a little different. 7723. Emptiness or vanity. Okay. So emptiness is correct there. Or the idea of vanity as emptiness. They sacrifice in vain. Their altars are as the heaps in the furrows of the field. And what is the message here? And I can wrap this up pretty simply. Altars as heaps in the furrows of the field. You know, when you plow, there's clods and little heaps of dirt that form. You know what I mean? When the furrows is you cut through with the plow, right? And it turns the earth. Turns things over. And it's like, and so you look out on a plowed field, and there are piles of dirt everywhere. And that's what they're saying. Altars are everywhere. They've got altars everywhere. They're ubiquitous. I like that word. Ubiquitous means all over the place. Wherever you go, there's an altar. Here's an altar. Here's an altar. They're everywhere. They make sacrifices all over the place. And what he's saying is contrasting with the previous two verses. I will yet make you to do these things. I've sent my prophets, but still, they are gone astray. They are following after idols. They've made altars and sacrifices as the heaps of the field. And they make sacrifices. And what was this all contrasted also with? They're making sacrifices. They're very religious. But at the same time, they've got their unjust scales. They're like a crooked merchant. In all their ways, they're crooked. They don't judge things right. They're very quick to judge others harshly. Quick to cast the first stone. quick to pitch themselves as better, or what they have to offer is better, rip people off, not give them the value that they, as advertised, so to speak. Oh, this is great. You're going to do great with this. Or, it's like going to the store and bananas, 44 cents a pound. And then they put them on the scale and the scale's weighted wrong. So you don't get 44 cents a pound. You pay more like 55 or whatever. And it's like, well, you could charge whatever you want. Sort of, right? Price doesn't work that way. Price does not work. You can just charge whatever you want. But if you want, you can raise the price and maybe people won't buy as many of your bananas. So it's cheating. You make it seem like a better deal, so they go to the gas station, your gas station, instead of the one across the street because yours is cheaper. But you're getting less gas. And in essence, you're more expensive. Ripping people off. It was a saying, is there balm in Gilead? Gilead was noted for its balm. It was the idea that brought about healing. Is there balm in Gilead? And I think he is referring to that colloquial saying. Is there iniquity in Gilead? You know what I mean? And so that is the altars. It's like, is there balm in Gilead? Well, yeah, of course there's balm. But Gilead is all about balm. Is there iniquity in Gilead? Yes, they are full of emptiness because they hearken not to the prophets. They follow after their wicked ways. They do not give heed to the Lord. And they make sacrifices to idols, thinking that somehow this is not working. This whole system they've got going is not working. God doesn't really even want sacrifice. He wants us to do right. Sacrifice is just a way for us to somehow reconcile ourselves with God because we don't do right. Just like all the laws of the Old Testament. It's like, it's not there because God didn't make a law about, divorce because he thinks divorce is a fine thing. He put it there in spite of, it's because men will divorce. If they can't divorce their wives, they'll murder them. And vice versa. Old time radio shows, I used to like to listen to those. There were always stories about wives wanting to get rid of their husbands because they don't want, but they won't give them a divorce, so they want to kill them. It's like, it's this weird, give me a divorce. There's no like, they used to have that where you had to give it to them somehow. I don't know. Where one person was unwilling, it was very difficult to get a divorce. So anyways, we will continue with verse 12. I think we've got that wrapped up. Like I said, I could go into more thoughts on it, but I think we're fine. We'll pick it up with verse 12 tomorrow. And thank you for joining me this day. I look forward to seeing you again, or being here again tomorrow.
My God, for I said, hear me, lest otherwise they should rejoice over me. When my foot slips, they magnify themselves against me. For I am ready to halt, and my sorrow is continually before me. For I will declare mine iniquity, I will be sorry for my sin. But mine enemies are lively, and they are strong, and they